there was a real strong effort in media and culture to make specifically white Christian men afraid to preach the Bible. And this is going to sound weird, but one of my biggest advantages is that I'm Black. Honestly, I think I can say things that other people feel like they can't say.
Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. Hey, today we have Julian Lowe on the podcast. We're going to talk about why white Christian men are afraid to preach the Bible. We're also going to talk about therapy, becoming the successor to a church that's been around for over 35 years. Calling, like what happens when being a preacher was never your dream. And we'll talk about his time at the Groundlings and comedy. Julian Lowe is going to be great. We'll get to the conversation in just a moment. But first, a word from our trusted partners, and make sure you subscribe where you're watching and maybe leave us a comment too. We've got some interesting things to talk about. But now, a word from our trusted partners. Today's episode is brought to you by the Preaching Cheat Sheet. So preachers, I'd love to know if you can relate to this. Okay, it's Thursday night. Sunday's message still isn't coming together. I mean, you could even start early and it's not quite right? The pressure is building. It's hard to decide what to add, what to cut, how to tie everything together. You want some family time, and you know by the time Saturday rolls around, you're just going to have to call it as it is, even if you're second guessing some of your message. Well, that's where my 10-step preaching cheat sheet can help. It's your quick check guide to ensure you've got an engaging, clear, and memorable sermon ready for Sunday morning. From your opening line to landing the plane at the end of your sermon and every step in between, you can use the 10 steps during sermon prep or even to start or to finish your message, whatever you want, to make sure you are ready to deliver an impactful message every single time you preach. And the big news is I've just released a brand new version of the cheat sheet. So if you've downloaded it before, be sure to get the new version in your hands. We got a lot of feedback. I improved it. Still, basically the bones are the same, but it's going to be even better. Okay, you can download your copy for free by clicking the link in the description of this episode or by visiting preachingcheatsheet.com. Again, that's preachingcheatsheet.com to download your copy for free, or simply click the link in the episode of this description wherever you're listening. This episode is brought to you by Gloo. We all know how fast things move in ministry and how hard it can be to keep up. Well, that's exactly what the Gloo Feed is built for. It's a completely free, regular text that delivers the latest research, trending topics, and updates from across the church. For example, did you see the surprising reversal in which Americans are trending in their commitment to Jesus? It's going up. Or did you catch the fresh insights on where pastors say they don't have enough support in their ministry? Well, you would have if you saw the text from Gloo Feed. This is the best way to stay informed about what matters, when it matters, and you don't have to sift through the noise, right? So if you want all the latest research, updates on AI in the church, access to resources, and a whole lot more, join the Gloo Feed today for free. Here's how to do it. Text my name, Carey, to 46816 to join for free. That's CAREY to 46816. Julian, you had a successful career in the music industry before you ever got into ministry. Can you tell us what you did in the music industry and how that might have prepared you or not prepared you for the life that was ahead in ministry?
You know, I think successful means I made some money. Successful means I got a chance to have published songs, had a publishing deal. I definitely wouldn't have been at the top rung of anything in the business, but I definitely had some traction. I think that creativity is the solution to problems. God said, came down to earth. He saw that the earth was dark, void, without form, and it says, so God created. So I think creativity is the solution to problems, and those who are not creative are going to have a harder time solving problems. So I would just say that for me, creativity is such a big way that I solve problems. We didn't have much time in the studio, so I wasn't a recording artist. I was a songwriter. So they'd put on a track, a pre-produced track, and really you wanted to show the studio and the record label that you could produce something on a relatively fast time frame. So you got 4 hours, you got to create a song. So a lot of that was improv, and a lot of people don't know this, Carey. I went to a comedy school when I was 19 years old.
Did you really?
Groundlings, which is one of the most popular comedy schools in LA for
I mean,
improv.
that's 80% of SNL are Groundlings grads.
80% of SNL are Groundlings graduates. So I didn't graduate from the program, but went there for 2 years and did something else. But so my background in creativity and comedy plays a huge role when I preach or lead. I mean, huge.
I did not know that you are a Groundlings, well, kind of alumni.
Yes.
What do you learn there? I mean, literally, the list is so long of people who went through the Groundlings. What did improv and comedy teach you about communication?
Well, number one is that it's primarily improv. So I was on the improv side. So you get thrown into scenarios where you're sitting there at a table with a young lady and they're saying, okay, you are a married couple and you guys are out to dinner celebrating your anniversary. Go. And you have to make it funny and you have to make it real. And then they will stop it in like 15, 20 minutes in, at least one of the things I did, and said, now you've just received evidence on your phone that your wife is cheating on you. And you have to go through that scene, all improv, and somehow people have to laugh. And so you have to find a way to take a serious situation and make it funny. So really it's about speed. So for example, I'm able now I still study for my sermons, but I'm able now to improv certain thoughts or certain things because I'm trained to do it fast. And so that's really the real thing. People can be funny, but how fast can you be funny and how can you follow the rules of being funny, which is a lot of things we could get into. There's certain techniques that
I would love to go
use.
there. I mean, I love talking to comedians. I tend to be funnier in real life than I am on the stage or behind the microphone. You know, boy, that sounded really dull the way I said it. So
That's
case in
hilarious.
point, like I'm pretty quick wit if we're just hanging out in the backyard or on a trip or something like that. But I find it harder on stage. So I'm curious, let's go there. What are some of the rules of comedy or the principles you learned?
One of the big rules is contrast is always funny. Now, if you're not afraid of offending people, you can use contrast a lot more. But our church is super diverse. So I want to say 20-something% of our church is Black. 20% is white. 20-something% is Hispanic. Another 20% is Asian. So there's differences in contrast between our cultures. So one of the bits that I've been doing recently is seasoning food. Where I would say some of you have 2 seasonings in your cabinet. I have 2 cabinets for my seasoning. And then the whole church laugh.
Are you talking to my group about having salt and pepper in their cabinet? Is that what you're doing there, Julian?
Yeah, so I said, if I go to your house and you got pepper and a bottle of pink Himalayan sea salt, I go, oh no. And everybody kind of knows who you're talking about without saying who you're talking about. And you're exaggerating. We know that most people don't have 2 seasonings, but contrast and then exaggerating the contrast. I went on a thing where another thing is called like a misdirect, where I will say something like, and also using contrast, where in cultures where I was talking about my daughter is really challenging me as a father. I said specifically as a Black father, and the whole room gets like silent and gets like, man, like praying for you. And I'm like, yeah, she's been asking me to go swimming. And and then everybody's just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So it's simple techniques that you could use. And honestly, as like, if you happen to be a pastor, I know there's communicators that listen to this that aren't pastors, but really is the moment you enter into a space as a pastor that other pastors probably would not say or wouldn't dare to try or say, it ends up being funny by default. So
any other rules or things you observed in the Groundlings? What does it take to be a comedian?
I would say that Steve Martin said this in his masterclass. He said, you have to be a master observer. So you have to be very observational. You have to notice things and you have to train yourself to notice things. And once you train yourself to notice things, then you can be funny. The other day, I was driving around LA, and there's these self-driving vehicles called Waymos. And I don't know if they have them where you are, but
No, but I've seen them. Yeah.
yes. And so back to the contrast thing, I was going to post something on the internet because I've been seeing them everywhere. And I'm like, there's something funny about this, but I can't figure it out. And so I was going to post on the internet something stupid where I was like, I would never get in one of these Waymos. I don't think they're safe. I'd rather get in an Uber, and I'd rather get in a Lyft. You know what I thought to myself? Every time I see a Waymo, I think there's way more safer options to get where I'm trying to go. And said it like that. And it's, just stuff like that. So, it's a bit of a dad joke, but like, just that's the way my brain thinks, is noticing things that aren't funny and what's funny about something. And then someone can go, there is funny. So I would say the number one thing is observation, and being able to watch, and being a student of people and a student of your surroundings, and not being afraid.
How do you train yourself to observe? I'll give you an example. I don't know whether you know John Acuff or not, frequent guest on this podcast, a good friend. John and I have spent a ton of time together offline. And I mean, that's just how he sees the world. We had lunch last week. He's always noticing things. He's noticing things at the restaurant we're at. He's noticing things in the green room we're at, like just pointing them out. I'm in the same room. I'm not seeing it the same way. I might see a church trend or something. So how do you train yourself to observe that way? And what are you looking for?
I think even from a leadership perspective, and this would be obviously a personal opinion or conviction of mine, I think that you have to have the discipline of observing so much, but also the discipline of not feeling like you have to do anything about everything you're observing. I think what destroys observation is observing 5 things. And let's say you see something wrong, but it never goes through that filter. Does this matter to me? Or does it matter to God? Does it matter to this organization? Does it matter? And being able to filter through that information. It's kind of like, Instagram or YouTube. I mean, they're capturing billions of pieces of data, and they're able to filter through that data to get down to the data that matters to them. And so I think, for a lot of people, being observant is overwhelming because they think they have to do something about everything that they're observing. But for me, it's training yourself to notice things without focusing on everything you notice. Yeah. So it's an observation without a focus, if that makes sense.
What value do you think humor brings to a sermon? Let's not talk keynotes, but let's just talk about preaching. I love to have something in a message, sometimes 3 or 4 times, that kind of loosens people up, makes them laugh a little bit, or et cetera. And I kind of chip away at that. And 9 times out of 10, it works. I mean, if I'm doing a keynote, it's super easy because I know which jokes work, and I haven't done that crowd before. Kind of like a comedian with a routine, is going to land in Phoenix or Chicago or wherever you happen to be. But for the average preacher, what is the value of humor? And then what tips would you give them?
Well, a lot of times, there's this verse in the Bible where Jesus says, "Blessed are those who are not offended because of me." There's also plenty of verses about anger. There's plenty of verses. When the whole room is laughing, it's almost impossible for anyone to be offended. When the whole room is laughing, it's almost hard for anyone to be angry. Laughter is one of the most healing things you could possibly imagine. When I was 4 years old, my dad would put me down, 4 or 5 years old, and he'd listen to these comedy albums. If you're a young person, an album is a circular thing that you put on a record player. And but he and I would crawl out of the room on my belly and lay in the hallway and listen to my dad laugh after he thought I was in bed. And I remember this feeling of seeing my dad. Looking back, I don't know if I could recognize at the time, being 5 or 6. My dad was such a hardworking man. He carried weight in the family. And I remember feeling this feeling on how much joy that my dad was having while laughing. And I think I decided in that moment, whatever I do, people are going to be able to laugh. It is the range of emotion in a human when they're listening to you that really creates, I think, an impartation. If someone's only angry, if someone's only sad, if someone's only convicted, if someone's only laughing, I think Ministries Without Weight, everybody laughs, but nobody ponders or thinks or actually feels in it. So I think someone feeling a range of emotion when you are up there for 35 minutes, the best films do that. The best songs do that. And I think the best sermons do it as well. And I think one of the things that's overlooked in communication or sermons is humor, because people think that they're not funny. But everybody's funny and everybody loves to laugh in their own way.
So if somebody's like, okay, I'm convinced I want to put more humor in my messages, what's one step they could take?
Well, one step that every communicator could take is, and obviously, I understand you have an audience that's not everybody's pastors, but I that's my framework. So I think it'll make sense to you. But Paul said, not only did I share the gospel, but my own life as well. And I think there's a piece of me that has to not just be willing to be Pastor Julian, because there's so many things Pastor Julian would never say. There's so many jokes Pastor Julian would never say. But then there's that joke that Julian would say. There's that joke that Julian would do. And there's obviously, boundaries for all of that. And like, I'm never going to say anything super crude, but I think it's bridging the gap and marrying the leader. There's a joke that a leader wouldn't say. And I'm not talking about crude or coarse or anything like in those lines. I'm just talking about this image that you're presenting, and there's something that's real about you that would break this image that you're presenting. So the first step would just be to ask yourself, am I being myself? Is this who I really am? We did a video for Easter that had virtually 1 million views, where we posted something about something and people are like, I don't know, would this get mad? Will people get mad about this? I'm like, yeah, but that's who I am. So if people get mad at something that's who I am, then I have to eat that. So I would say that's step number one, is a lot of people are operating in almost like a caricature of themselves, not who they really are. And so with these things coming up, they go, I can't say that I'm a leader, or I can't say that I'm a pastor, or I can't say that I'm this. But really, when they're home, that's who they really are. So that would be number one. Number two, I think humor is, you can start off with self-deprecating humor. Yeah. One of the things that I believe that I did is I started making fun of myself long before I would ever poke fun at anybody else. And so a balance between self-deprecating humor and, making fun of other things. The other thing too is like being willing to make fun of the church, being willing to make fun of, like, poke fun. I shouldn't say make fun, but poke fun, and being lighthearted about things would be another step where you can talk about, everybody in the room knows about church. So you can bring something up. I'll give you an example. I was preaching on Abraham once, right? And I was talking about, hey, for all the Christians that grew up in the church, remember that song? Father Abraham had many sons, and all the Christians joined in. Many sons have Father Abraham. And then I went, is there anybody in this room who has no idea what I'm talking about? And like a third of the room raised their hand. I said, all right, for the sinners, let's sing along. Just a small town girl living in a lonely, and the whole church went, it took the midnight train, and the whole church joined in and we did a song. I said, you got to make sure you always include the sinners when you, and so I'm calling them sinners while making a joke about it. So how easy would it be as I preach the gospel for that same person to repent? And so
that's funny.
It's those types of things. You got to know your audience, know your different things and all those different things. And I'm not an expert on comedy, but, I've done a lot of research on it and had comedians speak in my life and help make me better at it. And I don't know that anyone who ever heard me communicate and not laugh or at least chuckle, depending on, what the audience is. So hopefully that's helpful and makes sense.
Yeah. So comedy and music, what is one aspect of the music business, particularly in a place like LA, which, between LA and New York, You're in the music capital in Nashville, I guess. What is one side of the music industry that nobody really realizes is there that you saw?
One of the is that people who have dreams for doing music, one of the things that people don't realize about the music business is the way that the business side of that industry can kill the soul of a human being. You know, the church healed me from the music business. I think that when people say they have a dream to do music, that's not what they're really saying. The moment you try to monetize your dream, which is really difficult to do, you're basically saying not that your dream is music. Some people say they have a dream to do ministry when their real dream is that I want to be compensated to do ministry, and those are two different things. And so I would say that what most people don't know about the music industry is that the monetization, the attempt to monetize a dream is super taxing on the soul of a human being. And it brought me to a low place. And I would say that the church had to help me heal from my pursuits to monetize something that I felt like God had put in my heart. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, the weight of having a dream that you cannot monetize, or might I add, monetizing something heavily that really isn't your dream. Those two things are really hard to wrestle with.
Boy, there's a lot there, Julian.
There's a lot there, Carey. A lot of people monetize something that isn't their dream.
What was your dream?
I think I would have said back then, my dream was music. But to be honest, growing up, I had a really tough relationship with my mother. She passed when she was 19. I didn't feel like I mattered to my mom. My dad was wonderful, but often we adopt the mindset of our worst experiences, not our best ones. I think that's part of a human nature. My dad was amazing. My mom was really tough. And I adopted the mindset of my mom that didn't know how to love me more than my dad that did. And I think that I would have said my dream was music, but Carey, my real dream was to matter. I wanted to matter. And I thought that being famous and known for my creativity would mean that I mattered. And I wanted the world to know that I mattered. And that's, I think, a good portion of anybody that's pursuing anything in the entertainment industry. Otherwise, you wouldn't mind being at your local theater. You wouldn't mind making music with your buddies. But there's something in our soul that we want to matter. So that's, in hindsight, that's what I would have said.
Were you in the music industry before your mom passed away? You were 19 when she died?
Yeah, I mean, I would have been, the first time I ever recorded a song, we drove up to Ice-T's house when I was 16 years old in Hollywood Hills. And we would, on the weekend, I'd drive up there with my friends. It'd be Friday night. He'd be in the studio till 1 a.m. We'd sleep on the floor till 1 a.m. and he'd go somewhere. And we would record in his studio in his home from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. and then sleep on the floor another few hours and drive home. So yeah, it was a lifelong thing. Comedy, music, anything. Like it was a lifelong thing, just anything creative, but it kind of balanced itself and landed on music.
What was the height of your career in music for you? The song you wrote, the moment that you remember as sort of, oh, I've hit, this was the highest you got.
I think the first time we signed a publishing deal with Cobalt Music Publishing, and the first time that I had, tens of thousands of dollars hit my account for something that I wrote, I was in tears. I think the second time would have been, we were on this album of this massive K-pop, back then, pop star Boa. We were told this is going to change your life forever. And to some degree it did, because it opened up more doors. But yeah, I would say like those types of moments. But really, to be honest, like I could go down the list of the things that I thought were something and in music, and where it led to in the end wasn't what that height felt like in that moment. And I remember now being the lead pastor of Oasis now for 6 years. I remember, I could take you to the table I was sitting at with the very first time my pastor, who's our founding pastor, Pastor Philip, invited me for coffee. And that didn't feel like the height of anything, but that was probably one of the most significant moments of my life, because that was the first time that I sat down with the pastor. I would literally 9 years from that day be the succeeding pastor. So I could bring up a lot of moments, but none of those moments, when they all look back, were what I thought they were in that moment. But I've had some unbelievable moments, Carey, like moments where Beyonce's listening to our music and is thinking about recording our songs. And I remember what that felt like. Or moments where some huge producer is saying, hey, I want to, I believe in your music. Most of the moments are being believed in. I could pull up old emails right now. The president of Apple Music, Larry Jackson, I could pull up old emails from him when he was at Arista Records with Clive Davis, and you guys are going to be the biggest songwriters. So most of the moments were
Those are
moments
big
that
names.
felt like, yeah, they're big names. Like most of those moments felt like moments that my life was going to be changed forever. But they weren't. And most of the moments that I could tell you right now that you don't think would mean anything have actually changed my life. So it's a weird thing with my life. Some of the most insignificant things have turned into the most significant things. And some of the things I thought were so significant ended up not being much. So, but yeah.
So, I think a lot of us who do this kind of semi-public role in ministry, we're looking for validation when, Beyonce is listening to a song you wrote or Clive Davis is emailing you. What was that like? Did that feel like validation? Was validation a part of that? How did it leave you feeling in the end?
Yeah. I think about, for me, and I think about the presence of God. I think about the presence of God being with me right now. The presence of God is on this podcast with me and you. And I think one of the traps of the industry for me personally was there was always someone else's presence that was a human that would validate who I was more than God's presence. Because I was a Christian. But like, if I'm getting a room with God, that matters. No, that doesn't matter. I need to be in a room with this person. And being in a room with a person was validating my existence, my art, my creativity. And it was a slippery slope. Later on, when I would be a pastor, I had a relationship with one of the most massive pop stars in the world, so much so that they performed at the Super Bowl. They were the headliner of the Super Bowl. And to give you an example, I was already pastoring the church. And I text them, I'm so proud of your Super Bowl performance. And I remember thinking, I always wanted to be in a place where I could be associated with people that are headlining the Super Bowl. And so it was crazy. So I went and texted that person, great job, so proud of you. But then 5 minutes later, I found myself on Instagram posting a picture of their performance and saying, hey, I'm so proud of you. And I felt the Holy Spirit, I felt God say to me, why did you do that? I'm like, because I'm proud of them. Well, you already told them you're proud of them. And what I realized is that wasn't enough. I needed to let people who were following me know that I knew this person. And so even as a pastor, that has still crept into my heart a little bit, like who I know and who I'm with. And I got to do a wedding of a celebrity at People, and the wedding ended up being in People magazine. So I was in People magazine. I went to post that I was in People magazine and felt the check. It's one of the reasons why if I ever go to a church, Carey, I don't let people host me. Meaning that, hey, you can give me a hotel room, but I don't want to be waited on hand and foot. And churches hate it when I do this. And I just like to walk in the front door. Please don't park my car. I'm good. And they hate it when I do this. And so one guy asked me about it. And he said, well, why do you do that? I said, if you had a recovering alcoholic, would you take them to a bar? And he said, no. And I said, well, I'm recovering from pride and insecurity, so I don't need to be waited on hand and foot. It would harm. He's just like laughing.
Whoa.
But it's like, for me, that's my sickness. That's my illness, needing to be seen, known, treated like I matter. And so when people are over treating me like I matter because I'm the one with the microphone, it actually hurts me. It hurts my ministry. It hurts my perspective on who God is. So that's the way I would kind of like um, say it's like a mist that fades, and it feels so good to be in the mist. Um, it feels, I can't tell you how amazing, Carey, it feels to be in the midst of influence and famous people and money. And I cannot tell you how profoundly painful it is when the mist fades. And it always does. It always does. I was somebody for a few years and a nobody for more years than that. And there's no pain to describe when I had to pick myself up off of when the phone calls stop and the sessions stop and you know, and they found somebody else, you know. Um, so yeah, that's the way I would describe that whole thing.
Yeah, I'm just processing. I mean, thank you for your transparency. I mean, just being totally transparent. I'm sometimes a little too excited about who the guests on this podcast are. It gives you proximity to people. It's a name association. Sometimes, with your friend at the Super Bowl, texting him, but then posting about it after. I totally understand that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of that in ministry. There's a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of ego. There's a lot of, I'm in a green room. I want to get a picture with XYZ, right? When the mist fades, what helped you adjust? Because there's a day when all of our phones stop ringing and the emails stop coming and we're not who we once were. What has helped you adjust to a, quote, less glamorous calling?
I think what helped me adjust the most would be, I would say that a lot of people do not reflect, right? So they live in the future. What's next? And there's a good way for doing that. Most people are driven today by something they want to happen tomorrow. Your average leader is driven today by something they want to happen tomorrow. And when I say tomorrow, I say that from like this generalization of the future, a goal, a dream, a vision. Most pastors would have a vision Sunday. They would never have a reflection Sunday. They would never say, hey, this is like what I've learned in the last 10 years. This is what I did 10 years ago that I hope you don't do today. Everything is forward, forward, forward. So I think creating a habit of like, when you ask me about, I haven't been in the music business in 15 years, but when you ask me about it, I'm able to articulate clearly what I've learned because I spend more time reflecting about yesterday than projecting about tomorrow. And that makes my tomorrow way more clear and it allows me to live by, when God's wanted me to live by faith, clarity is my enemy. So in every season, I don't always know what's ahead, but I always have that part of me to reflect on, this is what I've been through. This is what my experience is. This is where I messed that up. This is what I would have done different. And so, yeah, I think that's how I would answer that question. Just developing the principle of being reflective, about yesterday and not just visionary about tomorrow.
When you got the tap on the shoulder, that conversation that opened up the possibility that you might become the lead pastor of Oasis, what went through you? What was that conversation like?
I think fear, but honestly, some disappointment. I had worked really hard to be in another space.
Wait. Disappointment? Okay, say more.
I'm going to be like, I think transparently, my wife and I was never our dream to pastor a church. I feel like one of the reasons that makes me an effective leader, if I'm careful to use that word and not sound arrogant or prideful, but I think the church is doing really well. It's growing, it's healthy. This isn't my dream. So when you leave the church on last minute notice, and you quit after I've invested in you, you're not hurting my dream. You're not hurting me. My identity's not wrapped up into it. And so it was never my dream. This started off with, wait a minute. that pop star that I told you about, I was pastoring them. I wanted to write with them, not pastor them. I wanted to write with them. And so it was a little bit of a disappointment. I didn't want to pastor a church. I wanted to do something creative. And so that disappointment has now turned to joy. But in the beginning, I was like, I was doing this to help my pastor. I was doing this because I loved him. I believe in him, still do. And I was doing this to serve him. This wasn't a stepping stone for me. Oasis is the only church I've ever been planted in. I grew up in church, going to church here and there, but like I never served on a church. Oasis is the first church I served. I would have definitely been going to heaven, but if they give away mansions in heaven, I would have had a duplex in the back. Like I was not following God like that at all. Like my entire 20s. So I go to Oasis, I'm serving. So from the time I went to Oasis, the first Sunday that I attended was in the summer of 2010. I was transitioning into the lead pastor role in October of 2009. This was like a whirlwind of like miracles and calling. So while what God wanted from me in the church was thriving and living, everything I had ever wanted from my own life was dying. And so it's like you're dressed for a birthday party at a funeral or dressed for a funeral at a birthday party. And it's like the dichotomy of all those same emotions. If you're doing anything for God, something's living and dying at the same time, I think, if you're doing it right. So there's pain and promises in the same person. Like, it was so fruitful and so painful. It was so awesome and so scary. It was all those things. So it was tough. Really tough.
Did you say you got tapped on the shoulder before you started attending the church?
No. Okay. No. So I
just wanted to get the chronology right. Maybe I misheard.
Yeah. So I was a volunteer in 2010. I came on staff. I was a kids guy. So kids pastor. I'm probably not even, I can say this. I'm one of the greatest kids pastors, Carey, that I've ever lived on the face of the earth. I can say that with full confidence. Preschool pastor, Carey, I had my own puppets. I had Reverend Billy Graham Cracker was one of my puppets, TD Milkshakes, and for diversity, Tito Testimony. Come on, somebody. If kids ministry at Oasis had a hall of fame, I'm in it. Let me just say that. As far as lead pastor, who knows? But kids pastor, I'm in it. So I grew up in kids ministry, and even today, I'm still known as a kids whisperer. We have a rule on our staff that any kid can interrupt any meeting for any reason. That's just our culture. I have a cake pop budget so that any kid can come get a cake pop after church. So I was a kids guy, and Pastor Philip said he wanted to meet this guy that everybody was calling the kids whisperer, and he started spending time with me. They eventually had me come on staff in 2013. I believe he got cancer at 2014, and it took him a year to beat cancer. And a lot of change happened in transition while he was gone, recovering from that. It was about a 2-year recovery. A lot of change. A lot of people quit. They thought certain people were going to be pastors. I don't know what was going on with that. And so I kind of was just helping him rebuild things and recover from cancer. And it turned into me leading the church. There was no real big plan. I just kept taking things off his plate, trying to help him. And when I took something off his plate to help him, it flourished. That was kind of the plan. He told me maybe a year. So if I took over the church, my wife and I, October 2019, he told me 1 year earlier than that.
Got it.
But I found the date that I was taking over the church in May of 2019. I found out that it was going to be October.
Man.
That was fast. And a lot of, obviously the calling of God, but a lot of just unfortunate health challenges, I think, expedited that a little bit. But yeah, it was a pretty quick, I was on staff 6 years total before my transition service, and started off as staff as an elementary school director and preschool. So
6 years in, what's your biggest surprise about the job?
My biggest surprise about the job? Wow, that is a great question. I would say my biggest surprise about the job is I'm surprised by the weight that leaders carry. There's nothing to prepare you for the weight. I thought, I'm the type of guy, I'm pretty confident. Hey, I got it. Let's do it. There is a weight. You wake up with, you feel it. You got to manage that. You when you go to bed, you feel it. So I'm really surprised by the weight. The other thing I am really surprised about is how much just preaching the truth of the Bible works to reach young people. I felt like young people stuff had to be hip, vibey, and cool. But I think I'm really surprised about how many young people in our church just want to hear God's word unpacked in a sound, doctrinal, theological way. That's the biggest thing I'm surprised, is that we don't really do vibey things to attract young adults. Nothing wrong with that. But I'm really shocked at how many young adults are in our church.
This episode is brought to you by Convoy of Hope. So mark your calendars and make plans to join me this fall for a very historic event, incredible conference held by my good friends at Convoy of Hope. I'll be at the Convoy of Hope's global headquarters and training center in Springfield, Missouri, November 5th through 7th for the inaugural Hope Summit. It's a gathering of more than 1,200 church and marketplace leaders, and it's going to provide you with a wealth of resources designed to help you have a significantly greater impact in your ministry, from neighborhoods to nations. Hope Summit has an amazing lineup of speakers like Chris Hodges and Jenny Allen. I'll be speaking as well. Natalie Grant will be leading worship. And can I tell you, they got a great little coffee shop in that airport at Springfield. Anyway, you can register at hopesummit.com/Carey to take advantage of a special discounted rate. That's hopesummit.com/CAREY, and hope to see you this November at Hope Summit. What do you do with the weight?
Well, for me, I just remind myself it's not my church. It's God's church. And it might sound cliche, and I think every pastor would say, it's not my church. I personally believe a pastor should have vision, but they shouldn't have so much vision that people think they're serving their pastor, but don't realize they're serving God. It's like a weird thing. I think a lot of weight pastors create for themselves. I was creating a lot of weight for myself. So I think for me, usually there's somebody around me that God has sent, that if I would just empower them, that I would just stop controlling it, they would take that weight off of my plate. So when I feel the weight, I just remember the church is not mine. I remember that there's likely someone around me that God has sent to help me manage that weight that I'm either not developing, not trusting, or trying to control it. And so those are the two big things. And then I'm a person who I'm not a huge believer in sabbaticals, if that makes sense. Like my idea is not like I'm going to work until I'm dead and then take 3 months off. I build rhythms into my schedule. So for example, I golf twice a week, and my mindset, sometimes 3. And my mindset is, when I'm golfing, I'm at work, because it's my job to do things that care for my soul. So if I go to the gym, I'm at work. If I'm hanging out with somebody and having coffee, I'm at work. I put it all together. I believe being rested and healthy is part of my job. So
That's a great
I have
framing.
really healthy rhythms. We work all day on Sundays, obviously, because we have people. But we Monday is 10 to 3. So you can drop your kids off, pick off your kids. Wednesdays 10 to 3, and then everything else is remote. So we only have a 3-day in-office work week. Everything else is remote. We have unlimited time off and vacation. We don't have 2 or 3 weeks. We don't, like, if you wanted to take 6 weeks off, you could, because we want people to be refreshed, and the church is blowing up. So just more building healthy rhythms. I would say that's the third thing, instead of having really unhealthy rhythms and then having to commit a season to health.
We have a very similar approach on that one. Yeah, that's great. But I hadn't really thought about my workouts and bike rides as work. I used to. I kind of forgot. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it's part of my job.
Yeah, an unhealthy you is not going to help anybody.
You know where I learned that from, Carey? I was like, when I came lead pastor of the church, our board took out something called Keyman insurance.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
And I said, what's key man insurance? Is if you die, the church,
They get money. Mm-hmm.
yeah, the church gets like whatever. But it was not, it was 7 figures or more. And so that was the first time I thought, wow, that if I die, the church needs money. It's probably part of my job not to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, maybe we should put that on somebody's job description. Hey, don't die before you're supposed to. That's part of your job. But if your job is a 50-hour work week and now your hobbies are to keep yourself alive or keep yourself healthy to some degree, then if I don't have time for my hobbies, then that's the first thing to go. So I just incorporate those things that keep me, and I have my ups and downs. Right now I got to get back. Like got to go to In-N-Out and have a hamburger when I'm so right now I think my discipline needs to be towards like making sure I'm eating. But anyway, so that's the way I look at it. So
that's a great
it's been
approach.
helpful.
Yeah. And that can always be abused, but I mean, most of us,
sure.
you're either, somebody said this, I think the late Tony Morgan said it. In ministry, people are either lazy or they're workaholics. There's no in between. And I know I tend toward the workaholic side. So it's good to know.
I would say that if someone's not abusing and taking advantage of you on your staff and team, your culture's not healthy.
Okay, say more about that. What do you mean?
If everyone is abusing or taking, then your culture's not healthy. Okay. So if you have a team full of lazy people, right? And this is obviously relative to the size of the team. If you have a staff of 2 or 3 people, everybody's got to go hard. If you're a startup, everybody's got to go hard. But what I'm saying is when you get to the point where you have 30, 40, 50 people on your staff, somebody in the room, like God has how many sons and daughters in the world, right? And some of them are taking advantage of a cheaper type of grace where because of the grace of God, I'm not going to pursue God fully. And that's just kind of what happens when you preach love in the gospel. So we don't have, I guess I would say there should never be anyone on your staff and team that you're not doing anything about. But I think it's healthy if there's someone on your staff and team that you have to have a conversation with about accountability, because there's enough freedom that someone could be dropping the ball.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, that's more what I mean by that. Not that.
Yeah, and you do get to a certain level of staffing. I had a coach of mine point that out a long time ago. He goes, it's easy to hide in large organizations, much harder to hide in small organizations, but it's easy to hide. When you get dozens of staff, that's easy.
Yes.
Julian, did I read this right? You went to therapy with Philip and Holly, your predecessors, when you were preparing for the transition? You went to therapy together?
Yes.
Wow. Can you tell us about that?
When I tell you that Philip and Holly Wagner could have taught a master class on transitioning a church.
Wow.
I don't know why. One stat says that hundreds of thousands of churches will have to transition in the next 10 to 15 years. Mm-hmm. If you are watching this and you are in transition, you got to call Philip and Holly Wagner. The way that they did it, never heard of anything like it, never seen it. And one of the things that Philip did, because he was in, therapy, is he invited me to his therapy sessions with him and Holly, and we processed emotionally his transition and me coming into the new role in front of a trained professional.
Wow.
So I didn't have the fear of saying things. I said things in that meeting that made him cry. He said things in that meeting that helped me cry. The maturity and the vulnerability of a leader to do that, I will never forget that. It prepared me emotionally to be able to take the role. It gave me specific insight on how him and Holly were feeling in that moment. It was powerful. It was powerful. I'll never forget it. It was life-changing. I'm not even communicating the words of how impactful that was for me.
What else did they do well?
The right next to that, if not more, is I was really empowered before I took over the church. So I was preaching more than they were. I was already leading the staff meetings. I was already making a ton of decisions. From my understanding, a lot of people is we bring this guy in, he works for us. The day he becomes the lead pastor, right? The day he becomes the lead pastor, that's when he starts preaching every Sunday. That's when he starts. And I was doing all those things. So by the time they announced that I was the next lead pastor, the whole church basically went, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, he's not already? Oh, okay. Yeah.
That was a formality. It would have been obvious to the whole church I was the next pastor.
What's your favorite part of the job and your least favorite part?
This is a great question. My least favorite part of the job is operations. Like fundraising, staff management. You know, we I will say this. One of the things that I've always said about transition is that pastors think they're getting a church, but pastors are getting both a church and a nonprofit. And so I was really good at the church side and I had to grow at the nonprofit side, which is, managing, debt, paying off debt, raising money, buying buildings. This church, our insurance company told us it's a $37 million property. It's a big cathedral in the corner of Wilshire and Normandy. And we have to figure out we have a ARM loan that matures in a couple of years. So we have to make sure that we're ready financially to do that. So that's my worst part. I just kind of love people. My favorite part of the church is just the people. Christina and I, my wife, we never wanted to lead a church we actually were not a part of. We function in our church, not just as the lead pastors, but we're in community. I still lead a connect group. My wife serves in the kids ministry. So there's just things like that. That's my favorite part of our church right now is how rich and awesome our community is. We have multi-generations. Our kids have mentors in the church. It's just a beautiful thing. Just the people of the church right now. I'm so grateful.
What's the most misunderstood thing about what you actually do as a pastor?
The most misunderstood
people
thing.
don't understand, staff don't understand.
I think the most misunderstood thing right now, and I'm going to speak generally for me because I know there's a lot of pastors, is that the truth of God's word has been politicized. So if I say something that's true, like politics have hijacked that. So I think that's the most misunderstood thing on both sides. So I can't bring up anything that's in the Bible that politicians are certainly arguing about without people thinking I'm taking certain sides. So
everything's been politicized, ideologicized, if that's a word, and weaponized, right?
Yes, it's weaponized. So that would be probably the most misunderstood thing.
So how do you guard against that? I mean, you're part of a church in LA. You've already said you've got a pretty diverse congregation, at least, ethnically diverse. I imagine it's somewhat politically diverse too. How are you navigating around that?
Well, how I navigate around it is I'm an equal opportunity rebuker. So what I mean by that in politics is I haven't just said things that liberals need to do differently. I've said things conservatives need to do differently. So I think that if people hear you on not challenging just exclusively one side, we love it's not perfect. So it's like whenever I say to my wife, I'm not perfect, but you really, I wouldn't say that conservatives are perfect, but those liberals. So anytime you're generalizing sin with it's not perfect, or I think for me, I was transparently, no matter where your values are conservative, I don't think we can call pride personality and say, oh, you might not like his personality. No, that's not his personality, man. That might be glaring pride that needs to be addressed. But also, hey, I have a conviction that about the sanctity of life. So watching you go back and forth between parties, like going like, hey, like, I get why you don't like this side, or I get why you don't like this side. I think that that's important. And that's what not try to do. I'm not trying to be nuanced. That's what I believe. I believe that both political parties have areas of the Bible they're not following. And so if I'm open to having discussions around both of those sides, then now I earn trust that when I really get strong about this issue, they're like, oh, no, you're not coming from a political party. You're actually talking about the Bible. One of the I'll give you a really practical example. When all the ICE was in LA and LA was super fearful, and while I do believe that we shouldn't have completely open borders, I also think that there's a human way to go about dealing with this that I didn't feel like was happening in LA. And I'm speaking to that. And so I'm talking about this, and somebody in the middle of our service yells, it was someone that didn't go to the church they were visiting, yells at the top of their lungs, Carey, Leviticus says that we should be kind and embrace the foreigner, at the top of his lungs in the middle of the service. And I stopped the service and I said, sir, you are right. But Leviticus also says something pretty strong about sexuality. Would you like to go ahead and yell that out as well? Dead silence. And I said, and this is what I'm trying to solve, church: selective theology, where we are passionate about one part of the Bible and disregard the other. And that's what I think most political conversations are about. Mm-hmm. And so if we can take the whole counsel of the word, we would discover that there are things that each party is doing wrong. For me, I feel like I'm a conservative that is not so caught up in it that I can't challenge the way that conservatives do things. So that's the way I would.
How are you doing that? Because I think you've hit a tension, and one of the ways is just avoid it. But you're in LA, and when ICE is rounding up people or the National Guard is deployed, that's happening in your city in real time. I'm sure it wasn't addressed in every pulpit. You went there. How do you do it in a way that doesn't blow the church apart? What are some, either mistakes you made, or like, oh yeah, if I approach it this way, it tends to go better? What are some notes for the rest of us?
Well, I told you at the beginning of the interview that, I'm the type of person, I'm going to say what I feel like the real answer is. And, people can do with it what they must. But there was a real strong effort in media and culture to make specifically white Christian men afraid to preach the Bible. Mm. So what I mean by that is that, like, if I say something, and this is going to sound weird, but one of my biggest advantages is that I'm Black. So that if I say something that is a biblical verse that they may have heard from a white Southern pastor, they can't tell me that I am some conservative, white privileged person that doesn't understand the plight of the brown and Black community. And so that's honestly, I think I can say things that other people feel like they can't say. On the other end, I can say things that, you went to that thing in 2020 where only people of color could say something. Mm-hmm. I do feel like that was a little bit a part of that. And so really it is, I actually have friends from both sides. Mm. So I have people that I deeply love that are really liberal, and I don't agree with a lot of stuff they say. I have people who are deeply conservative, and I don't agree with a lot of stuff that they say. If you're not friends with people, the Holy Spirit helps you be friends with people that without the Holy Spirit, you would never be friends with.
I have friends like that too. I'm just
hey,
keep my mouth shut a little bit.
I told my friends, I think we'd hate each other if it wasn't for, if it wasn't for the Holy Spirit, I think we'd hate each other. There was one pastor friend of mine He's a great leader, has a church in Arizona, unbelievable. And we actually got in an argument about some stuff. I think I was more being nuanced about something that was clear biblically. And he called me out on Instagram about it. And I was so mad. He was trying to call me out. And then God told me he was right. We ended up having a conversation and I ended up preaching in his church. And we're friends now. So I think it's more, what helps me is I listen to people from both sides and I'm compassionate, but I've already taken a stance. We will not compromise ourselves theologically in the effort to show empathy. And I do think that being a person of color in LA helps that, because people can't accuse me of not having context when I speak into racial tension like that. So I think that's helpful.
Well, I think you make a really interesting point that the culture has done certain things that make it, white Christian preachers afraid. Now, I would say, at least based on what I see in the church, not every white Christian male preacher is afraid. Some of them are on the whole anti-woke thing and becoming bold, and their churches are growing like crazy, et cetera, and they're enjoying it. They're enjoying this cultural moment. But I think you raise a really good point that there are a lot of white Christian men who are afraid because of what they say being taken the wrong way or alienating people, et cetera. Two questions for you, Julian. How do you think that happened? And then what's your advice?
I think that happened when the church got involved in separating people racially when we were supposed to be one group. For me, in 2020, I went on a really deep journey. I was angry, man. I was kind of mad at the church.
In 2020?
Yeah, man. I felt like we were handling it wrong.
How so?
I felt like I was just hurt by the racial tension being somebody Black in America and people saying that all of it was like not real, that, it felt that people were saying that, there were no challenges for Black people in America, that we just needed to work harder. And I had experienced some of those challenges. I've been golfing recently and at a really nice golf course, and a golf patron handed me their bag and said, "Could you put this up for me?" That's happened to me. And so I think I was just like really upset. I was trying to figure out, what did I need to do for the Black community? Because I was just upset and I was frustrated. It got to the point where it got unhealthy. I was going to events and counting Black people. And God was like, "What are you doing? Like, these are your brothers and sisters in Christ." And I was reminded of this, and I watched this speech, and I remember I'm weeping in my living room watching Martin Luther King's speech, and the moment where he said that his heart was that the son of slave owners and the son of slaves would sit together at the table of brotherhood. And his last public words were, "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." And so Martin Luther King's attempt to bring about equality was not because inequality angered him. His attempt to bring about equality is because his eyes had seen the coming of the glory of the Lord. And he was trying to make God's people look the way that God wanted to look at it. So for me, that just changed my whole perspective. And I realized I was like that yes, race is a real thing, but I've been blessed, I was the only Black person that I could find in LA who a white pastor transitioned their church to him. And the Lord was blessing me, and he wanted me to be a bridge to bring sides of a perspective together in unity and by the grace and glory of the Lord. And I'd had to let some things go and humble myself in order to be able to do that. And I think that in our society, part of the way America's wired is we are always trying to silence somebody else's voice to make somebody else's voice more important or louder. And so I think there's some ways where when women didn't have a voice, it's like maybe the plan is to silence men so that the women can have a voice. Or when men don't have a voice, we try to silence women. We're always trying to put somebody on the bottom rung on their voice matters. And I do think that the the Christian male, there was an attempt to silence that voice. I do think that. And I do think pastors felt the weight of emptying their churches if they just say something that's actually in scripture. And so I do think that. I do think that there's certain things you can't say. I've been asked to go to public events, pray for the city. And they say, we're good with you being here. Just when you pray, can you not say Jesus? We don't want to offend anybody. I'm like, I thought we were all here to be ourselves and be our authentic selves. So I would say that that's what I've experienced. But I experienced less of it because you can't call me racist. You can't call me a white supremacist. You can be mad, but you can't label me in the way that you could label other people. So everybody has a label in their pocket that they're ready to slap on somebody's chest if they don't like what they have to say. And I think that's one of the greatest cultural crimes of our day. Racism is being replaced what I would call thought-ism. I don't have permission to hate you for the color of your skin, but I do have permission to hate you for the way that you think. And we are replacing racism with thought-ism, and we are validating hatred towards anyone who views something differently than how we view it. And I think that coined phrase, thought-ism, will be the new racism inside the next 20 years in America if we don't do anything about it.
I hadn't heard that, but it completely resonates. So, we all have our own critics and our own challenges. And it seems, Julian, like you've done a decent job in being able to speak what you want to say and handle the critics. So for the preachers who are in the corner still a little bit afraid, like, I don't know that I can say that. What advice do you have for them, either in the framing of what they say or how they handle the critics? Because fear is a silencer.
So let's say, for example, you really had a conviction about abortion, right? And you're speaking to a congregation of liberals. The last thing you would want to do, in my opinion, is say Roe v. Wade was from God. When you're talking about a room full of liberals, and even if you think that, there's got to be a better approach than that, because you just politicized something that's in your heart theological, whether you agree with this or not. You've made a political statement about a theological principle that you have in your heart. When I felt like I wanted to address this, one of the things that I said was, in 2016, more children of color were aborted in New York City than born. And you felt the breath leave people's bodies in the room. I just want you to fathom that. More Black children were aborted in 2016 in New York than born. And I said, this is not political, but I want you to pull out your phone right now, and I want you to try to look to see if there's a Planned Parenthood in Beverly Hills. Try to find one in the Palisades. Try to find one in Bel Air. Try to find one in Studio City. Try to find one where there is a prominent rich people. Now I want you to go to every neighborhood that has people of color in it. And now I want you to try to find one. And everyone could.
Wow. So you can't find them in the rich, affluent, white neighborhoods. You find them in the more impoverished neighborhoods.
Yes.
Wow. I did not know that.
If you are a Black woman, you're 5 times more likely to have an abortion than a white woman. What if children are really the blessing of the Lord that God says they are? One of the reasons why people used to sacrifice children in the Bible is that they believed children were a threat to their prosperity. And they had to sacrifice their children to these gods that then would release prosperity. So I'm not here to talk about what we force women to do or not force women to do. That's not what this sermon's about. This sermon is about, this church will always serve the single mother who's pregnant. This church will always serve children. We will value children in this church. And then I brought the kids ministry. They started bringing babies out of the kids ministry one by one, and we prayed for every single one of them.
Mm.
And so if you weren't ready to hear about Roe v. Wade, you were ready to hear about that. And
but that's such a different reframing than the weaponized debate that's raging in the public eye right now.
Yeah, because we're not leading people to the truth. The Bible says the Holy Spirit will lead you to the truth. The church is being truth tellers, not truth leaders. So I'm not asking anyone to be bold about telling the truth. Come up with a leadership plan to lead someone to the truth. So if you know your church is liberal and you know you're in a liberal city, come up with a plan. I've been talking about children for 3 years. I've been talking about 4 years. I've been talking about this. We've been serving children, serving single moms. So now I'm building a case that I believe these children matter to God. I will say phrases like, I've never met a child that I wish wasn't here. Like, that's just who I am. I'm not asking you to agree with that. Now, here's the other thing I will say. In these hyper-structured services that are designed to pump people in and out, whenever Moses was given a law, he was given a law in the atmosphere of glory. So we wanted to so when Moses got the 10 commandments, the mountain was on fire with the glory of the Lord. So we want to pursue a presence in our church that is so powerful, tangible, and impactful, Carey, that it creates an atmosphere that I can tell the truth in. I don't want to tell the truth on bold truths on Instagram and bold truths on podcasts and bold truths. I get that. There's a place for that. But for our church, when everyone is like, maybe slower, the city's slower to have some of these biblical values, I want to create atmospheres that are easy to tell the truth in. And I know that an atmosphere of compassion, empathy, and God's presence can allow me to say something like that and people can receive it because we've kind of built the case over the last couple of years. So for me, it was like one of these days, I'm going to bring up what I think about abortion. Now, for the next 18 months, I'm going to build the case and lead the church to what I'm going to tell them in 18 months. Depending on where they're at.
What is one thing God's teaching you right now that you wish you would have learned 10 years ago?
I think 10 years ago, I believed in a God that saves, but did not satisfy. So I was saved from my sins, but I needed to find satisfaction in life through the things that I achieved, through the increase in the growth of our church, through the increase in growth of the finances and influence. And so now I turned 48 this year. I'm really on this journey to understand that Jesus both saves and satisfies, and that there's nothing that I could accomplish, do, or achieve that could give me more satisfaction than Christ. And sounds hyper spiritual, but it's just where I'm at right now. Everything that I've achieved has failed me when I rely on it to make me feel good about who I am.
That's true.
All of it's all failed me. So yeah, I think that's the big thing. I think I knew Jesus saves, but Jesus also satisfies.
Well, sign of a good conversation. I didn't get to most of my questions. So well done, Julian. This has been a real joy. Is there anything we didn't touch on that we need to touch on before we wrap up?
I think I will say this. I think that, and I don't know if you guys will keep this, but I will say, Carey, that you were always a big voice to the world, from leadership world, church world. And so in 2020, I got invited to be a part of a cohort, I believe it was towards the end of 2020, that was in your backyard talking life, leadership. And I was in a bad spot when that happened. And, those conversations and the hours you guys, spent, speaking into us really helped shape and really helped me explore some of the things that I've got the chance to share now. And I would just say that, if you're watching this, podcast and, I said something that you don't agree with, or I said something that you vehemently don't agree with, don't allow that to give you permission to hate me. I don't mind growing in front of people. Growing in front of people means that I'm so unafraid of growth that I can say something today that I wouldn't say 2 years from now. So, that's kind of where I'm at. I just want to be free. I want to be unafraid, and it's more important for me. And I want to encourage anyone watching. It's more important to me to be unafraid and grow than it is for me to be liked and loved. So, especially by people. So, if that encourages anybody out there, praise God for that.
To the extent that you're comfortable, Julian, what was that dark place a few years ago?
I didn't belong to anybody. I was given a church, but I didn't belong to anybody. I wasn't liberal enough for the liberals. I wasn't conservative enough for the conservatives. Wasn't black enough for the black people. Surely wasn't white enough for the white people. I just was like, I didn't belong to anything. And I felt like I had to be what people needed me to be, or I was like pushed out and ostracized. This feeling that everybody's like, those games that are like, where you're sitting in this chair and there's like and they throw something at the target and they hit the target, you just sink down. That's what I felt. Like I felt like that everybody was waiting on anything that I said to get rid of me or cancel me or and I think that you can only be canceled if you are afraid of being canceled. But I know that my wife is not going to cancel me. My kids won't cancel me. The people that really know me won't cancel me. And I know Jesus won't. And so I was getting free from this thing that I was going to say something that was going to ruin this incredible legacy that I had been given. That I was going to do something that was going to just destroy what 35 years of faithfulness from my pastors had built. And honestly, that there was no way that somebody black could lead something that somebody white used to lead and be successful. I'm being real.
Yeah.
I was afraid that it was going to turn into something that my pastors didn't want. I didn't believe that I could do it. So it was super, super tough and, proven by, the evidence that I'm always looking for. You can always prove something that you feel if you're looking for it. So, yeah. So I just had to stop.
If you feel it, you can find it.
Absolutely.
What helped you get out of that place?
I was in a place where I was really burdened by race, really burdened by this idea that as a black man, how could I do this? I would say that conversation like I had with you, and then obviously conversations that I would have with my pastors, Philip and Holly. But in later years, it would have been Frank Damasio, who just, passed away. It's hard. Everybody's had I've had people that weren't the same color as me be my leader. But when you start to have people that aren't the same color as you father you, it deals with a lot of the tension in that space. And I just think that in the church world, I will say what solved that tension for me in the race part is that if you're a pastor and you're white or black or brown or whatever, and you're a white pastor, you've only led people who don't look like you, but you've never fathered anyone who doesn't look like you. Or as a black man, you've only led people who don't look like you, but you've never fathered or mothered people that don't look like you. They've never become spiritual sons and daughters. That solved, I'm not kidding, 90% of the things that I was dealing with. I think I bring up that moment because it was like you weren't just talking, you were talking leadership, but you also opened up your barbecue grill in your home. Like that was crazy to me. So there was this leadership thing, but there was also this spiritual mentor father thing that happened. We ate together. It wasn't just, so.
It wasn't a 40-minute talk with a keynote. Mm-hmm.
No, it wasn't a 40-minute talk with a keynote. It was hours and hours and hours. And we ate, we talked, we laughed. And, I remember looking at my watch, like, it's like 8:30, like or 7:30. We've been here all day. And there was never this, I don't know. So that's what I would say. That's what it did for me. And I think that the leadership emphasis of the church, when all God wants to be is a father, if we do not, have an impartation from a father and we go leadership and nobody's dads and moms spiritually, I think it hurts people. And so I was healed by spiritual mothers and fathers who didn't look like me. We love to talk about how media makes everything about race. And I was almost 30 years old before somebody who was white and Christian said, I love you. So it's easy for them to leverage that because we're trying to diversify our churches, not our dinner tables and birthday parties. So that's what I would say. The diversity, not of the people who were around me, but the diversity of the people who loved me freed me from that.
That's very moving. It's been a few minutes since I had a cohort like that in my backyard, and you've just reminded me how special it is to me too. So grateful God set that up. Really am.
Absolutely.
Really am. Man, this is rich, Julian. I didn't know where it was going to go, but it went into some beautiful, beautiful places. I want to thank you so much for opening up not just the time, but your heart and your life and the truth. And this is leadership, this is life. This is what we're all in. And you made us all better today. And I can't thank you enough for that.
Appreciate you so much. What a blessing to be a part of this podcast, and so grateful for all that you do. Love you guys so much.
So if people want to find you online, where's a good place to track with all things Julian Lowe these days?
At Julian Lowe on Instagram. So I got my first and last name with no random numbers after it. Awesome. Praise God. At Julian Lowe. And then oasisla.org for any, if you want to check out any sermons or the stuff where God's doing in LA.
Julian, thank you.
Appreciate you, Carey.
Appreciate you.